trauma can create internal conflicts. For example, the conflict between the desire for safety and the need for connection, or the conflict between the desire for control and the reality of feeling powerless, the conflict between the desire to forget and the need to process, or between the desire for justice and the fear of retraumatization, conflict between the desire to trust or the fear of betrayal. So these are just some examples of internal conflicts that can be created by trauma. And so what we're going to talk about today is how do we try to resolve or at least lessen these internal conflicts so they play out less not only internally in our lives, but also in our relationships. Welcome to Trauma-Free Relationship. I'm Tom Philp, your host. And as a therapist, I've spent over 10,000 hours helping couples work through their trauma so they can repair ruptures, heal their wounds, and communicate from a place of wholeness and connection. Let's get started. Okay, as I said in the opening, there are all kinds of conflicts that can occur. Certainly conflicts can occur when we have trauma, like the ones I just mentioned. There can be minor conflicts, like the conflict of wanting to get out of bed in the morning and get ready for work versus stay under the covers and stay warm for another 5 minutes. Or, we all have these different conflicts, if you will, different motivations and different desires that sometimes can clash with one another. Certainly, we can have different needs sometimes that clash with one another. The need to take that next drink, the need versus being sober or not going over that line, the need to figure out how to deal with stress and pressure and our emotional regulation in healthy ways versus being more unhealthy by turning to drugs or alcohol or destructive behaviors. So there's all kinds of conflicts that we can have inside of us. And certainly trauma can create a special kind of conflict. What I want to do is look at one particular conflict today because this is the one I tend to see most often as I help couples work through their traumas so that they can create a safe and secure connection, not only within themselves, but certainly within the relationship as well. So the one I want to look at is the conflict between the part of you that is striving to keep yourself safe and protected from re-traumatization and triggers, and the other part of you that longs for the connection through vulnerability. Now, let me say again, we can only really connect through vulnerability. Vulnerability is the royal road to connection, meaning it is the way that we connect with others that allows us to create experiences to help us heal or to create different experiences than those that were caused by the original trauma. If we had parents or caretakers or a previous spouse that was constantly dismissing us, and it's caused some trauma for us. We feel unimportant. We feel like a nobody. Now, maybe this is some trauma that's triggered from the past. Maybe it's happened so pervasively in your current relationship that has created this deep wound. That ability for you to create new experiences means that you have to open yourself up to those new experiences, which means you have to let yourself be vulnerable. So one of the biggest conflicts I see with my couple is the conflict between keeping yourself safe and protected from harm, emotional harm that is, and also opening yourself up and letting yourself be vulnerable and taking that risk to create experiences with your partner that can help heal that trauma. So what I want to do is let's just walk through how might we begin to resolve some of these internal conflicts. Well, I think the first step is to suspend for a moment, if you will, the idea that you are a unified whole. I know we feel whole. I know we feel like a one self. But what research tells us is that really we're not this one self. We're not one anything, that actually we're a collection of parts that sort of work in tandem together. And so just hang with me for a minute here and go with me. Think about yourself not as being one whole person. You have like one sense of self, but rather think about yourself in having multiple parts. And the wisdom behind this is really brilliant, because what that means is that you are far more adaptable and you have far more ability to help heal yourself by having multiple parts than as if you were just one person, which is one wounded person or one broken person or one unhealed, resolved trauma person. But rather, that's only a part of you. There's another part of you that is whole and healthy and striving to get your needs met every single day. There's a part of you that gets up and kills it at work, and you're just, a 900-pound gorilla at your job and you're doing awesome. But when you're alone, you tend to fall apart. Well, there's all these different parts to us, and it's really important to be able to recognize that we're not just one unified whole, but rather we can be a collection of parts that make up and work in tandem together, that then kind of fool us into thinking that we are a one self, so to speak. And oftentimes, I get it, we reflect on ourselves and we think, oh yeah, I know me, and I know what I'm like, and I know myself well enough. But then if we reflect long enough, I think we find that, gosh, there's some times where I didn't know I was strong enough to get through that. Or I was surprised by my ability to be able to handle that. Or I didn't know I could actually act that way in those circumstances. So if we reflect long enough, I think we can see that there are multiple sides to us. So that's the first thing I want to say. Let's dive in here. How do we learn to resolve internal conflicts? Well, first of all, let's just identify some parts. Let's be aware of the internal struggle, and that we have different voices or urges that at times are competing with other parts of us. So if we just say, okay, that's a given, I can certainly recognize that, whether it's the urge to protect myself and pull back, or whether it's the urge of this longing to lean into the discomfort so that I can get my needs met, whether it's my ability to pull back and not communicate a boundary versus being able to communicate that boundary with the fear that I might hurt somebody else's feelings. So there's all kinds of different conflicts. And if we just recognize that those conflicts exist in us, that's sort of half the battle right there, I think. The next thing we need to do is we need to name different parts of these conflicts. So what I want to look at today, as I mentioned, is this conflict between the part of us that keeps us safe, the part of us that really wants to protect us and move into our protection and either shut down, or we might criticize, blame, depending on our particular attachment style and history, or just that part of us that doesn't let anybody near that wounded part. It's kept deep, deep down, and it's guarded by 1,000 guards that we don't even let anybody come close to. We know it's there, but oftentimes we don't even like to go there ourselves. Versus that part that longs for a deep, close, personal connection. Even those with avoidant attachment still have that longing for that connection inside of them. It hasn't gone away. Just because they down-regulate or because they turn off their attachment needs when they're triggered doesn't mean that it's not there. It's still deep inside them, that longing that others will show up for them and be there. So let's name those parts. Let's name the part of us that wants to protect, the protector part. And the protector part is really good at what it does. And I mean, it is just a stellar part of you, because it can sniff out any potential danger way before it even happens. And it can draw a perimeter not only just around you, but around 50,000 feet around you, so that nobody can come even close to re-traumatizing you again. So that's the protector part, and it's good at what it does. And then there's this wounded part, this traumatized part that longs to have a different experience, that longs to get its needs met, but that is so encapsulated by fear that it won't come out of its own cage. That's actually the key and the lock is on the inside, but is so embraced by fear that it relies on the protector part over and over and over again to help protect it. So the next step is just to name those different parts. Now, you might give different names to this, and that's perfectly fine. Whatever name you come up with is perfectly acceptable. But in this scenario, try to think of what these different names might be. Now, the next step we want to do is we want to listen compassionately to each one of these parts. So let's approach each part with curiosity and empathy, not with judgment. So in terms of the protector part, what's its intentions? What is it afraid of? And what does it often need? Think about that for a moment. This protector part, this part of you that works so hard at protecting you, what's its motive? Obviously to protect you, but what are the intentions behind it? Does it often work for you, or does it work against you? Does it see how it can harm you at times and keep you locked in your trauma from being able to create new experiences, new healing experiences that you need? Does it limit that for you? What is it afraid of? And what often do you think it needs? Does it need such overwhelming safety that it can allow itself to sort of step aside so that this other hurt, wounded part of you can actually unlock the cage and emerge and be able to actually receive and take in different experiences so that it can heal? These are just some examples of how we might listen compassionately to it. The next thing we want to do is we want to validate its concerns. We want to understand and tell itself, look, it's okay. I get how you're protecting me. I understand how important this is. You're doing your job, and you're doing your job very, very well. But I also need you to know that you're hurting me, that you're keeping me from the ability to step out and be vulnerable and take a risk with my partner that allows me to actually get a different experience than the one that caused my wounds. So being able to validate those concerns. If we talk to the wounded part of you, we might say something like, hey, I get it. I get how scary it is to come out of your cage, and I get it feels safer to stay inside there with the key in your hand, too afraid to step out. I understand that. I really do. And you have every right to want to stay in that cage because what happened to you isn't your fault. But if you're ever going to heal, if you're ever going to have the life you want to have and the relationships you want to have, to be able to trust others ever again, you've got to learn to emerge from that locked cage. So the next thing we want to do is we want to create a safe space so that we can establish some kind of communication. As you've just heard, I was sort of talking out loud to each part of us. And there's a couple of ways that you can do this. One is that you can imagine that part of you sitting in a chair across from you. And you can talk to it. You can visualize it in an effort to be able to sort of talk to it. And then you can actually even kind of listen to how it might respond. And you can create a dialogue. Now, I want to be able to say it's really important that you don't in any way become so overwhelmed with emotion here that you'd re-traumatize yourself. So if imagining it across from you seems too triggering for you, then don't do that. Maybe just imagine it inside of you. Maybe you just talk to yourself, to that part of you, but you're not visualizing it outside of you. Rather, you just know that that's a part of you internally. So you're going to want to kind of have a conversation with it so that you can really hear what it has to say, and you can also talk back to it as well. And then the next thing is I want to encourage that dialogue, encourage the parts to communicate with each other, to understand each other's perspectives, and try to find some common ground. What does the protector want to say to the wounded part? What does the wounded part want to say to the protector part? Can they find any common ground? Can the protector part step back a little bit and allow the wounded part to emerge and step out and take a little more of a risk? And so as you go back and forth, oftentimes this can create a loosening and more of a flexibility in your responses to others and to your partner. And so as you go through this exercise, I think what you end up finding is that hopefully over time, and it can be very emotional, it can be very hard. And again, if you start getting too triggered, I want you to stop. I absolutely want you to stop. There is no point in trying to complete this exercise in order to just become re-traumatized. And it's very possible you might need to go to a therapist to help you with this. And that's okay if you do. That's no failure on your part. This is all, even engaging in this exercise is you talking to that protector and talking to that wounded part and trying to do something different. Even engaging in this exercise is that wounded part of you saying, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to do something different than just letting my protector run my life. And so being able to have this dialogue back and forth can loosen up those different parts of you so that you can create more flexibility in your life and in your relationships and in your responses to others. Finally, we want to address the underlying needs. What is the need of the protector and what is the need of the wounded part? So the parts that address the underlying needs and the wounds that are often driving the conflict, we want to be able to get to those underlying needs. And then, of course, once you have those underlying needs, then reach out and get support from others. Find a confidant. Find somebody that can help you and hold you somewhat accountable so that you are able to try to meet those needs more. Maybe it's talking to your partner. Hey, I've just tried this exercise, and one of the things I'm going to try to start doing is speaking up more and talking more about my feelings and what I like and I don't like. Would you help me with that? Would you help me be able to do that? Maybe just ask me sometimes, is that what you're really feeling? Or is there something else you'd like to say to me? Or maybe ask me sometimes, how can I make this conversation so safe for you that you can really tell me what you want to say? If you have that kind of communication with your partner, then you can elicit help in being able to lessen those internal conflicts. All right, well, I hope you found this enlightening today. Again, the huge caveat to this is I don't want you to go and re-traumatize yourself in any way. So if this exercise becomes too emotional, stop. Do some of your relaxation exercises. Get back into a place where you feel more comfortable, more centered, not necessarily in the middle of the conflict. And of course, if you need to, you can reach out to a therapist and they can help you be able to do this. And also, you can reach out to your partner that might be an aid to you as well. Now, if your partner is triggering in many ways, you don't want to reach out to your partner for support in this if they're too much of a trigger right now. But if they are able to give you enough of a safe space, they can be a great ally and a great resource in this. Okay, thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate all the feedback. Let me know more of what you want to hear and don't hear, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Trauma-Free Relationship, a podcast for the healing of attachment trauma. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or our website at traumafreerelationship.com. Be sure to look for our next episode on your favorite streaming